So, hey everyone, I am back with another interview with another wonderful Webtoon Canvas creator. Today we have Taylor,
Hi.
the creator of the Beasts of Amity Bluff.
Ooh, mystery, spooky. Insert sound effects.
Insert sound effects like ooh.
Yeah.
But Taylor has this really wonderful webtoon that I really like your storytelling. You have great cinematography, and you're able to just create this vibe that almost feels like it belongs to a really bingeable TV show.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so sweet. You're making me blush.
Oh, so really quickly, let me just read the introduction. I mean, the summary, not the introduction. You know what I mean. You guys know what I mean. After discovering a dead body, a group of teenagers' summer breaks turns into a twisted trail of horrors as they uncover the dark secrets of Amity Bluff and the sinful acts committed by the very people who were meant to protect them.
Again, insert spooky
Woo!
sound effects.
So yeah. So how did you get into art?
So I got into art. I mean, growing up, I always did art, like most kids did, but I was never like super good at it. I was pretty average all through like elementary school and stuff, from what I can remember.
Mm.
And then in like middle school, kind of all at the same time, I got into watching like Mark Crilly, and I got into watching anime. Specifically, I watched all of Inuyasha, and then like from there started watching other shows. And I really liked the artwork, and so I started getting into following those Mark Crilly tutorials and drawing and wasting all of my parents' computer paper.
So how'd you get into anime?
Well, growing up, I watched Avatar: The Last Airbender. That was kind of the first real cartoon that I really liked because I was not a fan of cartoons growing up. I don't know why in my small brain I just didn't like cartoons. But Avatar had an art style that looked to me like real people,
Mm-hmm.
more so than other cartoons did. And it had a story that didn't make me feel like the writers were like writing down to my level. They expected me to figure some things out for myself. And then when I kind of found anime, again, because I was watching Mark Crilly, and that's kind of what he specializes in and talks about and references a lot. Uh, that was when I kind of found that love for the medium, I guess. Then getting into high school, I took a single art class my freshman year of high school, and I did not like it at all. It was taught by one of our football coaches,
Oh.
and I was like, this is not fun. I like art, but this is not fun. And so I, for several years, was like, this is not going to do the art class thing. I had a relative who was very, very sweet and paid for me to take art lessons with a guy who lived like a city over where I was living at the time. And the way this class was run was you would sit with a group of people, and everyone brought in like their own, just whatever their like own projects were that they were working on at the time.
Mm.
So you didn't have, it wasn't like they were giving assignments in the class. You brought in your projects, and this guy would go around and talk to you about what you were working on and give you advice, let you ask questions. First of all, he was a great guy, and he was older, and he really loved, he had this deep love for Disney, which was really cool. So we would go into his classroom, and he would like put on Disney music while we all worked, which I don't know that everyone loved it as much as I loved it, but I loved it. And the way the class worked was you would pay however much it was, and then you would get like 4 to 6 weeks where you would go once a week and work on a project. And he was the guy who kind of sat down with me, and he was like, because at the time I was really just doing it like character designs and sketchbooks and like illustrations of characters. And he was like, you really need to be doing like storyboard stuff and putting these characters into motion and heading in that direction. And so he helped me kind of figure out how to do that, and like how to put images into a story and make them look like they're in motion, kind of a thing.
Do you know what he did before he was a teacher? Because it's really interesting that he even knew about storyboards, because I don't think I even started to hear about it until I got more active being
He,
online.
yeah, he actually did. He did a lot of graphic design type stuff for like large billboards.
Mm.
But he had in my conversation with him, I gathered that he had relatives who had worked in the music industry specifically for Disney,
Oh.
um, which was why he kind of knew about them. And he had me like making like short comic strips, silent comic strips, like without words, just putting characters into motion and trying to convey expressions and stuff.
Mm.
And I think really just influenced and solidified kind of where I wanted to go, as opposed to doing illustration, doing like comic work.
Yeah, I can really feel that influence in your webtoon. Like, there's a lot of just great character acting moments where I feel like almost if someone shot it live action, they could do some of these scenes like shot for shot.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah. Were there any other like mediums that influenced you growing up?
I did do a lot. I was a big reader. I loved reading. I read on Wattpad, when that was a thing. I read a lot of Stephen King. That was kind of the like set of books that my mom knew when she was buying me gifts. If she got me a Stephen King book, it would be something that I would like and that I would read. So he was a big influence in like developing like how I see people interact and stuff,
Mm.
you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So, you brought
Uh,
up like Wattpad too, right? Right.
uh-huh.
So I'm going to bring you down the rabbit hole because I'm curious. We can go back to talking about books and stuff too. But what did you think about the news that Webtoon bought Wattpad?
I, I, I'm gonna have not gonna put too many opinions out there because I don't feel like I know enough
Yeah.
like about business and the marketing aspect of it, because that's just not something I'm very educated in. I because they both have similar issues in my opinions in terms of how they market their creators. Uh, so I don't think that a lot of the complaints that people have had about Wattpad and Webtoon in the past, specifically with like the rating system and original creators and canvas creators and stuff, I don't know that them merging together is going to do much more than it just kind of being a PR thing.
Hmm.
You know, I don't think that more people are going to come to like Webtoon and Wattpad that weren't already on one app or the other.
Hmm. That's a
Like I said, I don't know much about marketing.
yeah, yeah. That's just I thought I'd ask because I don't know that many people who are actually have that much experience with Wattpad. Like,
They just, at least since the last time I've been on it, it's been a couple of years. They had kind of the same issues that Webtoon had, where it was really hard to like put in a keyword and like find a bunch of things that would interest you. You kind of had to like go through the genres or like specifically look up a creator. That's one thing I liked. You could like go to the creator's like page and see everything they had written.
hmm.
Maybe something that Webtoon could implement in the future. But other than that, it had a lot of the same like issues with the format of the website that Webtoon I feel like has.
So, it seems like you're talking specifically about discoverability.
Yeah, that's the word. That's exactly what I'm thinking about.
All right, I feel like I kind of cut you off because I got distracted because I've been thinking about this kind of stuff recently. So any other media do you think that influenced you, or are we good on that?
I think we're good on that. Not particularly. I wasn't super exciting growing up as a kid.
Oh, I feel like no one thinks they're exciting growing up, you know? Because you always think, oh,
Yeah,
I'm just me. Everybody
yeah,
looks like me.
exactly. Yeah, I'm like, as I'm talking, I'm like, every kid did this, right?
Every single, yeah.
Every single kid had the exact same experience that I had.
Yeah. So on to the next section, we're going to talk a little bit about Webtoon and webcomics and the internet
Okay,
and all that fun stuff.
awesome.
So
I'm
how
ready.
did you first hear about Webtoon?
Well, I was thinking about it, and I was like scrolling through Facebook, and I found someone had posted like screenshots from Miss Abbott and the Doctor. I don't know if that's still something that's actually on Webtoon because I haven't read it in so long. But it was just one of those things where it was like 100 photos that someone had posted, and you could like swipe through and read the comic. And I was swiping through, and it ended, and I was like, I'm not ready for that to be over. So I started doing some Googling, and I found Webtoon. So originally, I was really just on there like sporadically to read this one comic, and then it kind of drifted off, and I didn't use it for a while because I, kind of stopped reading the comic. And then I saw the ad for Siren's Lament, which I found is where a lot of people found Webtoon from. Was that like ad that was going around early on when the comic was being published? So I officially got the app at that point and started reading. I read Siren's Lament for a long time. That was kind of the only one I was reading. And then I started reading like I Love You and Lore Olympus. It just was kind of a natural thing. My roommate in college, she was a big Webtoon fan. So we started exchanging Webtoons that we thought the other person would like.
Yeah. So, if you don't mind me asking, what year did you feel like you really started reading?
Oh gosh, I don't want to go too early. I want to say, I'm just going to say my freshman year of high school because that sounds like a safe year, which would have been 2014, 2013, 2014. Off, but I feel like I was pretty early on.
Let me double check. I think it was 2015, but I keep saying that in these interviews without actually checking.
Yeah, it may have been 2015 then. I know it was really, really early on because it was right when they started like publishing in the United States. Expanding into the US in 2014, according to animationmagazine.net.
Oh, okay, we got our answer then.
That was what Google put up as the first answer, so it must be the right one.
It must be. If Google tells us, we know it's correct.
Yeah, so it must have been like 2014, 2015.
So I've been saying the wrong thing in several interviews.
It is what it is.
It is what
close
it
enough,
is.
right?
Yeah. Just a year off. So, why did you decide to start posting on Webtoon then?
Mostly because my like only real experience with webcomics had been again when I was like 13 and on that Drawcast app and reading other people's comics where they posted, like a page a day, and it was always really exciting to get those 3 or 4 panels every day. And then reading on Webtoon, and I really liked the scrolling format on Webtoon because I actually think it simplified comics for me a little bit, not having to think about page layout necessarily. So it was kind of the obvious choice. I already knew how the website worked and kind of what looked good, that kind of thing. It wasn't like super dramatic or anything. I didn't put a lot of thought into it.
You weren't super like overthinking big brain with it.
No, like I said, marketing is not my thing. Business is not my thing. I took the most obvious choice and I ran with it.
Could you go in a little bit more on like why you decided to do a comic in particular to begin with?
Well, I started out when I was younger. I did a lot of writing. Like I said, I liked reading. I did a lot of writing, and it was when I was talking with that guy that I took art classes from. He when he started talking about like storyboarding and specifically, I think he wanted me to move towards making things for television. But the longer we talked about it, I was like, I have story ideas. I do that. I'd done one other comic, again, when I was on that app, Drawcast. I had done a comic where I posted like every other day a page, and it wasn't very good, but it was fun. And I remember having fun doing it. And it was just kind of always in the back of my head. that a comic would be something that'd be fun to make, but it seemed like a lot of work. And so I never like took the step to really start doing it. I had all the ideas and like the character designs and stuff, but I never really had the time. And then we got put into quarantine and I had the time.
Yeah, what a mood. That sounds like a lot of the recent comic creators that I've talked to.
Yeah.
So, what's your favorite? What are some of your favorite things about being a webcomic creator?
Honestly, I like reading like web comics, obviously. But I always find that whenever I'm reading something, there's always a point where I'm like, man, I wish they had done X. Like I wish like they had let the relationship like stretch out farther. Or I wish they hadn't done that so soon. And so as selfish as it sounds, I feel like I get to make those decisions now. And so it can be exactly like the thing that I want to read, which sounds a little bit self-centered, but I feel like you have to be a little bit self-centered to be an artist anyway.
I
I feel like it's
definitely
mostly just writing for myself.
yeah, I definitely get a similar feeling of like whenever I embark on a project online, I'm just sort of like, just give me a minute and I think I can do something
Yeah.
the way that I want to see it done, you know?
Yeah. Like I'll see a scene, I'll be like, wow, that would have been such a good scene. Like it is a good scene, but it would have been so much better if they had just done. It's always the word just that pops up in there. Like they probably considered doing exactly what I'm thinking and then chose not to do it for a reason, but I wanted them to do it anyway. Plus, like writing a mystery, I really like having interaction of people like making guesses on what's happening because I know what's happening and only me and Owen, who is like, he's my fiance and he does all my editing, know what's going to happen.
So do you get like a lot of guesses in the comments or like do people send them to you on like social media?
I get them in the comments and I also, my fiance who I was just talking about, he and his roommate both read it and his roommate reads it like the day that it's posted. And so I usually get to like, I'm like in the room when he reads it. I get to see his reactions and I'm always very excited when an episode like garners the exact reaction that I was going for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I get people who will like leave a comment where they're like for example, they were like, someone asked, is David Warren's dad? And I was like, that's a good idea. No, but that's a good idea. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I definitely know what you mean.
So I love it when someone gets it right. You know, I'm like, oh man, and like I want to be like, oh, you're right, exactly. You know where I'm going, but can't. Like someone will say something, and you're like, oh man, I wanna like give you a gold star.
But it can't. It would be spoilers.
Like when an English teacher is reading a paper, and the one student in class finally gets the metaphor.
Yeah, exactly. So now I want to hear about things that you think that either Webtoon or just like the webcomic community in general could work on.
Okay. As far as Webtoon, I feel like there's not a lot to discuss that hasn't already been talked about in some of your interviews. I don't like the rating system. And I don't totally understand like the algorithm and how they determine popularity. Does that make sense?
Oh, could you go into that a little bit?
So when I started posting, I did a lot of like seeing where my comic ranked specifically in thriller, because it's technically under thriller and under romance. But I know that I'm not going to rank super high in romance because it's not mainly a romance.
Yeah.
So I keep an eye on like where I am when you filter by popularity in the thriller genre. And I find that my comic jumps around a lot, like goes up and down dramatically very quickly. And like sometimes it's between two comics that have like thousands and thousands of followers and lots of episodes and everything. And then sometimes it's between like brand new comics. So I'm not sure if they do it like on a day-to-day basis or if it's like an overall popularity ranking. it's hard to cater to the algorithm when you don't know what the algorithm is, as soulless as that sounds.
Yeah, it's very different than YouTube, because YouTube, as much as YouTube can be annoying sometimes, and as much as they don't know exactly what's going on, they at least try to go like, so this is what we're going for. We're looking for people who get a lot of watch hours, and we're looking for people who get like a high click-through rate. But with like
Uh-huh.
Webtoon, we don't even know what stat they're going for.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they're looking at the rating or if they're looking at like specifically like interaction. So like your views don't matter if you're not getting any interaction, or if it's a solely based on views thing. I tried to Google it and no one really had no one had an answer.
I think number of episodes probably factors in there too, because what I noticed is you see a lot of like really big series, and then you see a lot of brand new series. You don't really see that many series that have been kind of in the middle, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think part of it, because I definitely notice whenever I update, because usually like I don't get interaction on my episode as much the day that I update as like the next day.
Yeah.
Um, so my like ranking, not my ranking, my popularity ranking, I guess, will drop dramatically the day that I update, and then kind of slowly work its way back up, and will be usually at the highest like the day before I update again.
Mm.
Uh,
I wonder if it's like, so my ongoing theory, and maybe I'll have an answer to this by the time this video actually comes out,
yeah.
but I'm wondering if it has something to do with the like ratio to number of episodes.
I wonder. That's kind of the thought that I have. That maybe it's a like ratio thing. Maybe it is an interaction issue. So like if you have 15 episodes and 300 likes, and then you post that 16th episode, now the ratio is off,
Yeah, yeah.
kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's what
I
I've
don't know.
been wondering if it is, but I don't think we're gonna know for a long time if we ever know.
I don't know. Does Webtoon know?
Does Webtoon know?
Does
That's a good
Webtoon know? Or did they just throw this website like into the void and it became popular and now they don't know what's happening?
that's a good question. That's a good question. I think that's something that they're gonna have to rethink as the site gets more comics.
Uh-huh.
Because it used to be like, yeah, a lot of people would see your comic when you update because there weren't that many comics. But with the pandemic, the number of creators has really, really increased.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of it is like algorithm based and how much of it is the people who actually work for Webtoon. Just because from what I've heard, it sounds like they have like a very they're very involved in like looking at comics on their site and promoting canvas creators and original creators, obviously. So I kind of wonder how much of it is actually algorithmic and how much of it is them like as individuals having to keep up with their website.
Yeah, yeah. And I do like the idea of having like hand curated sections, unlike YouTube, which is just sort of like whatever the void wants to
Mhm.
throw at you. It's just like as it gets bigger, I think it's going to be harder and harder for them to manage, really.
I was thinking earlier, and I had the thought that like I wish that there was another like level of filtering when you're looking for new content. I
Mm.
think it's hard with something like a web comic because you can't you would have to have the comic as a whole have tags, and what tags would they have other than their genres, kind of a thing.
Hmm.
Because each individual episode you can like tag the individual things, and someone could just start in episode 6 because episode 6 has the beach episode and they were looking for something about a beach, kind of a thing.
Or maybe they just really enjoy beach episodes and they only read
They
beach
just only
episodes.
want to read the beach episode.
Yeah, yeah.
Some days you just need the beach episode.
Yeah, I guess that's a problem they're going to run into going forward, because like Wattpad, it's not that hard for them to. I haven't been on Wattpad, so I don't know if they do this, but like with text, you can just do like machine learning pretty easily. It's not that
Uh-huh.
hard to input. Or like with YouTube, what they've been doing is originally they did machine learning with the tags. People started abusing the tags. So now it's leaning towards machine learning with the description and machine learning with the actual audio because they have the technology to turn the audio into text, which is
Uh-huh.
easier to like, you know. But it's hard.
Yeah.
It'll be hard for like Webtoon to figure it out because I just feel like it would take so much more for a machine to figure out what a Webtoon's about. So really, they're gonna have to
Yeah.
lean towards like a
Well,
tagging
because
system and just hope people don't lie.
yeah, because it's not like the you can like zero out the text from the images on a webtoon unless Webtoon wants to like implement their own space to edit your comic before it's published. So like the text is actually coming from the website,
Mm.
which might be. I mean, I think that would be a pain in the butt to have to do, but it would be an option.
We're on to our next section. We're gonna finally get to talk about the Beasts of Amity Bluff. So
All right.
I wanted to hear about some of your inspirations. I know you talked about like Stephen King earlier, so I can definitely feel some of those vibes. But like, what are some
Yeah.
of your other direct inspirations for the comic?
Yeah. Well, when I started writing the Beasts of Amity Bluff, first of all, it was not the Beasts of Amity Bluff. It's gone through a couple of rewrites in the last couple of years since I came up with the idea. But the whole thing was that it was meant to be like a coming of age story meets mystery thriller because that wasn't something I had seen before.
Mm.
So on top of like Stephen King being a huge inspiration, I think you'll see in some of like the side plots that I write, a lot of them take heavy inspiration from Stephen King books, older Stephen King books that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
I took a lot of inspiration from like teen, young adult TV shows. So like one that just came out recently that I haven't watched yet, but definitely is a good example of the genre is like the live action Winx thing that they're doing
Oh,
on
I haven't had the
Netflix or
chance.
Hulu.
Yeah, it's on Netflix. I haven't had the chance to actually watch it myself.
Because that's the one thing that like in horror and thriller that I think sometimes can be lacking is the way that characters interact with each other because they're so absorbed in the ambiance and the emotion of like being scared. So watching things that are more focused on the relationships is really good. Right now I'm rewatching all of Grey's Anatomy, which is all about character relationships.
Oh my gosh, I love
And
Grey's
I'm learning a
Anatomy.
lot.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
rewatching all of it. I'm on season like 14.
I always get stuck after the merger. I have trouble watching past the merger.
Yeah, no, I can see that. That was not the best arc. I'm at another point now where like as I'm watching it, I'm like, this isn't a great arc, but my fiance is eating it up. So it must be a good arc to some people.
Yeah.
Somebody must like it. They made it for 17 seasons.
Yeah, someone must really enjoy it out there if it's going
There's
for
just
that
like
long.
one person out there who's like keeps sending them money to make more.
Like, here, have a couple of $1 million under the table.
Yeah, just for me.
Yeah, you think you can make Meredith go through this particular character arc?
Yeah.
Wink, wink.
They're like, I really like Jackson Avery. I want to see more of him. But yeah, that's kind of again, Stephen King was the biggest one because he wrote a lot of like the small town horror thriller type stuff. And he has this way of like weaving stories together so flawlessly that I really appreciate. And I would like to try to replicate. What's another one? Oh, Bates Motel was a big one. That was like something I watched early on when I was writing the first draft. That was a big inspiration for like the town that they were in.
So, leading out of that, I'm going to skip around here. But I was curious, like, I feel like you do like a really great job just like creating the vibes of a small town. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Okay. I guess to start off, I should do a disclaimer that I'm kind of a fraud. I came to college. I go to college in a smaller town. And when I came here, I heard a lot of people talking about like, oh, we're going to go to the city to like go to the mall or whatever. They were talking and I'm like, where's the city? Like, what are they talking about? And I realized that I had grown up in quote unquote the city. I didn't know that people called it that. So my exposure to small towns was I had extended family who lived in small towns that we visited like once or twice a year. And I always liked the idea of living in a small town and being like around that community and having like a large group of people that you knew and like everyone knew you kind of a thing. I thought it was cool. So a lot of like when I'm writing things, I run it by Owen specifically because he grew up in a small town. And I'm like, would this really like make sense to be a thing that would happen? And he'll help me steer it in the right direction. Because I think a lot of what I've written so far is just built on my limited exposure to the small towns that my family grew up in, and then like tropes of small towns that you see in movies and on TV.
Yeah, let's talk about character developments.
Okay. So I wanted to talk about this because this is one of those things that I can't really like bring up to people when I'm like gushing about my comic because they're not also people who write comics. So they wouldn't totally understand. But when I originally wrote this story, it wasn't called Beasts of Amity Bluff. It was called Cecily's Eyes, and the main character was this girl named Cecily. It was her and Rudy and another character, and they were like the trio that I had written. And I decided really early on that I didn't like her that much, the main character. I had given her too many like personality traits almost. Like I had put too much of the weight of the story on her shoulders, and it made her kind of a boring character.
Yeah.
And so it was her, it was Rudy, and then it was like this rich boy who really didn't have much of the plot going on at all other than being the love interest for the main character. And so I ended up just cutting both of them out completely. Rudy's the only surviving character of the original story. And I basically just took Cecily and just divided her into two people. And that's where I got Warren and Evelyn. And I don't know, when I wrote Evelyn, I was like, she needs a brother. I just felt it. And so I made Edmund for her. And because there was a version of the story originally that took place like in a different time period, and she needed somebody who was family to interact with that wasn't a parent because she was too respectful to like argue with her parents. So I made Edmund.
So that's something I do a lot in my character development too. Like things just sort of come up into like existence with like logic. Like what you were saying earlier with like, oh, she has to have a brother because she's too respectful to argue with her parents. Do you have any other examples of that where you're like, oh, this has to be that way because otherwise this character thing wouldn't make sense?
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. Again, I'm going back to Evelyn because I think that it goes back and forth between her and Warren being the main character, but I really originally wrote her in as kind of our main character. And there was a version kind of right before I finalized the Beast of Amity Bluff where Evelyn existed in a world where Rudy didn't. I like wrote Rudy out of it just to try it and see if I liked it. She was mean. Like she was really, really mean. And I was writing and I was like, I don't know why, like I can't just write her the right way. And it has to do with like the fact that she had Rudy before and he had been like the person that had the most influence on her character. And I kind of realized that I had no control. It was all about their relationships that had already kind of developed in my head. Or like when I was writing Warren's aunt, I really enjoyed writing her because I was writing a character who felt like she knew a lot about Warren, but Warren had never met her before. They had two very different impressions of each other that she kind of knew who he was, but he had no like idea who she was going to be going into it,
Mm-hmm.
which was really fun for me. I feel people have a hard time writing characters sometimes because I think that people act so differently around different people. Like no one's just happy around every single person that they meet.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Like you can't just be like, this character is happy and is always going to be happy no matter who they're around. They're always going to be in a good mood. It's not possible. It doesn't happen.
Mm. So something I got from that I'm kind of curious to hear more about is you were talking about how you did several rewrites.
Did well, the story originally, the original version, which was Cecily's Eyes, where Cecily was the main character, I wrote that the summer that I graduated high school. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do like a webcomic and it's going to be this. And like I said, the longer that I wrote it, the more I was like, I just don't like the main character. But I loved the like town that I had set up. I liked the ambiance I had given everything. And so I wanted to stick with that. And I rewrote it several times. I even tried changing like time periods. I tried a number of things to try and make it fit what I wanted. And the version that didn't have Rudy in it was the first version where I introduced Evelyn and Warren. I was like, they're what I need. But I also need Rudy. And so I just put it back in pretty much the exact same place that it had been originally. And just started like connecting Evelyn and Warren to people in this town that I had already created previously. So I really didn't end up like my net distance that I moved away from the original idea was not very wide, but I mean, it was probably a year and a half, 2 years of just reconsidering over and over and over again.
So do you have your full story written out yet? Or do you do...
I have a set of bullet points that are all of these events that I have planned out that are like the major events that are going to happen to these characters, regardless of anything that they do, kind of a thing. But I don't have like specific, I don't have every episode written because I don't know, like the very last event, the climax of the story, I don't know how at that point my characters are going to react necessarily to that event. And how they react to that event is going to change the outcome of the event. So I try to I have all of the big events planned, and I'm just sort of always writing towards those and letting the characters do what they need to do.
Yeah. That sounds like such a great way to just get to know your characters so well. Because, like, especially the example where you, like, just had Evelyn without Rudy. Like, I feel like it's so insightful to almost, like, separate out all of these pieces of the puzzle and get to really know them well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of one of those things where sometimes I'll be writing, like for Edmund, because Edmund's not a very nice guy. And I'll be writing, and I'll be like, well, that's kind of out of left field. Like, nobody says that. But Edmund would. You know, that's the way that he is, even if I don't necessarily agree with it. I have to like separate yourself from your characters a little bit.
That's one of the more fun parts for me, just trying to keep that balance between stuff that I know has to happen and then my characters just living their lives and doing stuff that feels like almost out of my control.
Yeah, no, and the way that I write, the one kind of downside to it, in my opinion anyway, is that I think since I have all these events that are like, again, regardless of intervention, are going to happen to these characters, it sometimes I think is going to start to feel like the plot is happening to them as opposed to like them influencing the plot. Because there are some, because like a good example is like One Piece. Like it's going in a direction, and then the main character Luffy will step in and just like out of left field do something and completely change the direction of what's happening. But I just have put my characters in a position where they don't have that kind of power.
I think that's
Go ahead.
I was gonna say that's like a really interesting difference between manga and like comics, or like even just like American writing in general. Because here we have sort of like, all right, guys, we're gonna do the hero's journey. We're gonna take out our story circles. We're gonna have Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. But I feel like in some of the Japanese media, they sort of like mastered the art of just like, oh yeah, stuff just sort of happens, but we're gonna go along with it. Because like, how else are you able to write a series that long and have it follow a 3-arc structure?
I have not watched all of One Piece. I only know the reference because, again, my fiance Owen, he watches it and has watched every single episode and read the entire manga. I don't know how he has any time to do anything else in his day. He's so invested, and it's clearly divided up into arcs. But when I look at it as a whole, I'm like, this is all over the place. Yeah. And then there are like references back to like the very first arc. They'll make a reference 1,000 episodes later.
Like, oh, that's fine. We're finally getting what that like random stone means from chapter 2. We're in chapter like 500.
Yeah, they'll be like, remember when that one guy like made the off comment that he had visited this town and met a guy? Well, now you get to know who that guy is, and now we're in that town, and we're gonna tell you all about it.
Yeah, it's like a totally different type of attitude of writing. Or like recently I've been trying to get into like Japanese novelists, but it's hard to find like proper translations. My Japanese is not good enough I can read like a novel. But like a lot of them too, like maybe it's just the types of books that I read and it's not like a very good insight into the world of Japanese novels, but like a lot of them I'm like partway through like the second book in the series and I'm like, I don't know where this is going. And then like halfway through like the third novel in the series you're like, oh, so now we finally get to know what the plot is.
Well, that's kind of going into writing a little bit. When I was originally trying to pick genres for my comic, I wanted it to be a mystery. And then I was like, but if I'm going to write a mystery, you have to like introduce everybody right at the beginning, and you have to introduce the problem right at the beginning. I was like, I kind of want people to like naturally meet these characters and kind of figure out what the problem is going to be for themselves. You know what I mean? Rather than just like throwing all of this information in like chapter 1.
Yeah.
Which is why it ended up being a thriller instead of a mystery, because I didn't think it was quite like horror movie tropey enough to fall into the category of horror. That makes sense.
Yeah, I can feel that. Genres on Webtoon are kind of like question mark to begin with, though.
Yeah, because you have like the normal ones that are like romance, mystery, and then you have like sports.
Informative.
And I'm like, informative. Who I don't.
They have zombies and they have post-apocalyptic as like separate categories.
Oh,
that's a fun
well, how do you pick one?
I don't know why zombies is its own category, because like every zombie story could either go into post-apocalyptic or supernatural, you know?
Yeah. I find it interesting that they have a genre that's called heartwarming.
Oh, I think that's from like the short story contest.
Is it just for short stories, or is that like...
No, they've started putting like originals in that category too, if you go on the original side. I think it's like, you know, like fluffy stories, like, aw.
Stories that make you feel good. Studio Ghibli-esque stories.
Yeah. Or I guess my thought would be like sometimes you just like, I want to read something happy and just know that it ends well, you know? I don't want to be on that emotional roller coaster. I just want a little bit of fluff in my life. I think that's why
It's like, I don't need the twists and turns. I just need happiness.
I just need a wholesome story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see why you kind of
Right.
want to do thriller instead of mystery.
Yeah, because originally it was going to be a mystery. I was like, I don't think I can introduce an entire town of people in, an episode.
I mean, you could. It just probably wouldn't end up well.
It'd probably be a pretty boring. It would be like an episode of just character sheets.
Yeah.
Start studying, guys.
You just go past all the characters in the town, and then there's like that one like random like name block in front of them. It's like, I hope you remember.
Yeah, good luck. And then, 25 chapters later, we're like, remember that old man that was in the very middle of chapter 1? Here he is.
Here he is. I kind of relate to that because I feel like I've had to take my comic really slow because I'm going to do there will be mystery, but people have to understand certain things before the mystery happens. And like, I know it'll pay off to go this slow eventually because otherwise things are going to feel like really rushed or they won't make sense. But it kind of sucks to just know that this mysterious thing is going on in the background and nobody else knows but me.
Yeah, no, I get that. Because I also feel like my story is like slower than I would like it to be. I feel like people are still in the stage where they're like, okay, this is kind of random. Like, what are we doing here? And I'm in the background going, I promise there's a reason.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what it is yet, but I promise.
Yeah, same. Oh my gosh. Or I feel like on Webtoon they like snappier stories too, and I'm just like, ugh,
Yeah.
why do I have to do this
I
to
like
myself?
things that get to the point, like episode 2.
Yeah, if by episode 3 we don't know what the main conflict is, sorry guys, we're not gonna read it.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't we talk about like your writing process again, but like just
Okay.
instead of like generally, like what's your writing process when you're going through like an episode?
Yeah, so usually my episodes, I plan a couple at a time because whenever I sit down to write, I want to start middle, end of like a thought. And usually that takes more than one episode to do since I don't do super long episodes, or I'm trying not to do super long episodes.
Mm.
So I'll write like I'm writing a novel, a page or a page and a half usually is an episode. And then I'll sit down and I'll kind of set up a grid, and the grid has like panel number, the image, and the text. And I'll start putting in like what I want my panels to look like, how many panels I'm going to have, and kind of where I want the text to go.
Mm.
Which sometimes I end up sticking to. Sometimes I get partway through writing it and I feel like I'm just doing like text. So I'll step away and kind of like thumbnail a little bit and break up the process some. But for the most part, that's pretty much my writing process. I always know sort of what points I'm heading to. Most things have to happen in a certain order. Every so often, there'll be an event where I'm like, I don't have a spot where this has to happen, and I use it as whenever there's like a long arc, I'll kind of throw it in the middle to sort of break things up, so I don't feel like I'm throwing lists of events at people.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the major part of my writing process is that like when I'm initially typing out in novel form kind of what I want to have happen. It's very sporadic and chaotic.
What a mood, though. What a mood.
Yeah. It's like sometimes it'll be on my computer. Sometimes I'm like at work, like desperately writing on a sticky note.
Yeah. I do something really similar, but I format it slightly different. I use like a screenplay writing software, but I have basically the exact same information as you do, so.
Yeah, like I said, sometimes I go through and I do that whole script thing. And for some episodes, I really need that.
Mm-hmm.
Like for making sure that I get all the information in a timely manner. But there are just some episodes where it's better to go straight from that novel format and start sketching and moving stuff around. So I don't feel like I'm just throwing text box at people.
Mm-hmm.
And, when you're sketching, it's not too hard to throw something out if you decide that that's not going to work. If I've typed it out and done a couple of sketch layers to try and make it work and realize halfway through it's not going to happen, I have to change everything that follows it usually.
Yeah. So something I was interested in hearing about that you were talking about earlier is you said that like your fiance edits for you usually?
He does. I mean, he is he's an avid anime watcher. He's an avid manga reader, but he hasn't actually read a lot of Webtoon. And so I like hearing his input as somebody who's watches anime and watches it very critically, actually. Like we'll be watching a show and I'm just vibing and enjoying myself. And he's like, they could have done that so much better if they had done X, Y, or Z. And so I trust his critical opinion of my work. And he just has a tab on his computer that's like my Google Chrome already logged in. And so whenever I finish an episode and like schedule it to go up, he can just click in and go to edit it, quote unquote, and read through it and check it for me.
So does he read through your scripts or just like the more finished phases?
He doesn't read through my scripts usually because again, they tend to be kind of chaotic and he has a hard time like picturing what I'm going for. Usually he'll see I'll format it and set it up when it's like in the final sketch to line art stage. Because depending on the episode, some episodes I go straight in over the thumbnails with line art, and some episodes need some more sketching to figure out.
Yeah.
And he'll look at it with the sketched out images, and I'll write in the text, and he'll go through and make sure everything looks good. And then sometimes he's really nice and will do some flat colors for me, like while I'm at work, and surprise me.
Oh, that sounds nice.
That's really nice. I'll come back and be like, oh man, I got to color this background. And he's like, I already did it. I'm like, thank God.
Yeah.
He's wonderful. And then he looks at it at the end to make sure like everything looks good together and that I didn't like put any weird typos.
Yeah, that's something that's really hard to check yourself if you're like rushing to. Like, I just found that I am completely unable to proofread the day that I post.
Yeah, and like by the time you get to like the end, you've read through the same thing, 10 or 15 times at least. And so you're just like scrolling through to make sure everything's there.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to hear your thoughts on is just like, you're really great at creating this like sense of like suspense.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to hear some of your thoughts about writing these like suspenseful scenes.
Well, first of all, thank you. I really appreciate that. I don't know, because I feel like with comics, because when you're watching a movie that's supposed to be suspenseful, you have things like the jump scares and the music. You can't have that with comics or with writing in general. But with writing, because there's no images to go along with it, you kind of create a sense of suspense because the reader's having to imagine what's happening. And the pacing is set by like the speed at which you're able to read the novel. And you kind of lose that advantage when you're writing a comic because you have to show what's happening. So rather than the suspense being created by the viewer watching the characters like living this scary moment, you almost have to create the suspense by conveying the feeling to the reader so the reader feels like they're the ones experiencing the moment, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does.
So like first of all, I have to work on pacing because I know, at least in my case, whenever I'm scrolling through Webtoon, I scroll really fast as I'm reading through.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a tendency to, like, when I want something to slow down or like build suspense, I'll just put the same panel multiple times, or like the same panel zoomed in or zoomed out, depending on the situation, just because it kind of forces the person reading to slow down a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I think artists, like, as far as the artwork is concerned, I like getting rid of the background, which was something that I learned reading Sweet Home.
Oh, Sweet Home is so good.
And they're so good at creating suspense. And I found that, like, when you suddenly drop the background, like, out of a scene, it almost, I don't know if it necessarily, like, creates the feeling of uneasiness, but it almost reminds me of that feeling that you get when you're scared and, like, the blood rushes out of your face, kind of a thing.
Mm.
At least that's the feeling it, like, I think it kind of conveys, and it forces the reader to focus in on, like, one single thing.
Yeah.
Almost creates the same illusion that, like, novels have, where you can't see what's actually going on around the character. You're just having to kind of trust, like, what they're saying is happening.
Another thing that I wanted to bring up, because I talked about this earlier, and you kind of talked about this with, like, your studying storyboarding
Mm-hmm.
and, like, your art education, or, but
Yeah.
I wanted to hear you specifically talk about tips or just thoughts in general. I guess it doesn't really matter about, like, drawing emotions. Some of your, like, shot choices, you'll just see, like, part of a pose, but, like, just with, like, a hand grabbing a shoulder, or just like the way you can see part of the body, like, leaning, you can really feel, like, the expression. So I wanted to hear some of your thoughts on that.
Uh-huh. Well, like I said, I love movies, and I watched a lot of movies growing up. So as far as, like, placing shots and things, I think a lot of it comes from just how they set up shots for movies. And my main priority usually is making sure that I let the reader know where they are in the room. And so I try, even if there's only, like, one character who's, like, speaking or acting, that you can, like, you're looking past another character, or, like, you can tell where they're placed in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually my second priority after that is, especially in conversations, creating, like, a power dynamic between two characters.
Oh.
So, like if one character is supposed, like, if they're on the same level speaking to each other, or if, like, one character is, like, talking down to another character, I might, like, tilt the camera a little, the camera, quote unquote, so it actually looks like they're, like, on a higher level than the other character, that kind of thing. That makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, really. So, because I love cinematography and all that kind of stuff too, but, like, imagine, like, someone listening to this and they're, like, wondering how to study, like, films to make their shot choices be better. How would you recommend going about that?
Well, I mean, I guess the most obvious answer is to watch movies, but watch movies that make you feel the things that you're wanting people to feel in your comic. So, like, for example, I probably wouldn't watch like, Howl's Moving Castle and avidly take notes over things that I would want to do necessarily. But, like, if I was gonna write an episode and I was like, I want this episode to be, like, really light and soft, I might do some studying for, like, in that way. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm asking that a lot. I'm not great at explaining things.
Oh, yeah. So, like, when you're studying film, are you, like, drawing out, like, little thumbnails, or do you take notes? Like, what kind of things do you pay attention to?
Usually, as I'm watching films, I usually don't. I just sit and watch. because I'm not a great multitasker about like watching and paying attention to a movie and like drawing or like doing anything else at the same time.
Mm.
Like as I'm watching the film, I'll that's where I learned like when one character is talking, you should have another character kind of like in front of the camera, almost blocking part of the view, so you know where we are in space.
Mm-hmm.
So like I'll take mental notes like that, and then I can go back through the movie later and like pick out shots that I really liked, because we live in the day of the internet where I could just, you know, zoom through
Yeah.
and find what I want. And I'll, you know, like screenshot it and I'll either sketch it in my sketchbook, or sometimes if it's like a really weird shot or like a weird angle or something I can't like wrap my brain around, I'll just like export it into Procreate, which is what I draw on my iPad.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just like trace over it and then take the image, like trace over the important parts and then take the image away to kind of see like what's actually happening, like what they were going for without all of the extra detail and visual input.
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you for explaining that for everyone.
I mean, it's just, I really enjoy movies. And as far as like poses and stuff, I just look at a lot of reference. I'm really not good at like picturing a pose in my head and doing it. I usually just go on Pinterest and like scroll through until I find something that's like similar to what I'm looking for. And I try to figure out like why it's kind of what I'm trying to picture in my head.
Yeah, I feel like the thing about your posing though is I feel like you're so good at picking the appropriate pose to use though. You know? Like it has like a real sense of direction to it.
Thank you. That's really sweet. I don't know. I don't know who I was watching. I think it was, I want to say his name is Walter Ostile. He's here on YouTube.
Yeah.
And he does some really in videos with really interesting information. And he talked about like turning characters and objects and things so you're focused more like on silhouette than necessarily like having something coming straight at the camera or straight off the camera. Silhouette, and then if they're moving left or right, depending on if you want them to be moving with the reader or against the reader.
Yeah, let's move on to our last section.
Wow, look at us go.
Look at us go. So now we're on to our advice section.
Oh boy.
So if someone's just getting started, how do you recommend that they like approach learning writing?
Learning like writing specifically?
Yeah.
I'm a big advocate for consuming media and replicating things that you like. So if your favorite movie is Jurassic Park, sit down and write a story that takes place in in the world of Jurassic Park. You don't have to publish it anywhere your first time, and do it and see what you like, see what's easy and see what's more difficult, and kind of move on from there. It should be for you at the end of the day. It should be things that you enjoy writing.
Yeah, I really agree with that sentiment of like you should create things that you enjoy. I think sometimes people get too focused on trying to create things that are successful, but like not the right kind of successful.
Yeah, marketable.
Yeah. Marketable is the perfect word.
Yeah. I find whenever you're whenever you're watching something and it like makes you have a particular reaction, or you really, really like it or you really, really don't like it, just get into the habit of stopping and asking yourself, like, why did that make me feel that way?
All right. So another thing I wanted to hear about, because it sounds like you're still in college, is balancing life and comics. Do you have any advice with that?
Well, I guess to preface it, I am in college. I'm a junior in my undergraduate for public health, and I work a half-time job, so I work 20 hours a week. I think what's been most successful for me, I hear a lot of people talk about like you need to like get in the habit of like scheduling out like this much time every day for your comic if you're going to be successful in doing it. But I found that if I just let myself work when I have time, I'm much more successful. Because when I try to schedule out, like, I'm going to work on my comic Monday from 3 p.m. to 6 p.m., I'm going to work 3 hours on it. If I'm busy at 3 o'clock, I'm like, I'm just going to throw that whole idea out the window and then I don't get any work done. But if I just know, like, I want to work on it a little bit every day, Monday comes around and I have a free hour here and like a free 20 minutes there. I got a lot more work done during that time.
Yeah, it's like
Sometimes over scheduling is like a downside.
yeah, I can definitely agree with that, especially if you have like any sort of like anxiety. You're like, oh my gosh, I missed this like 1 hour slot. I'm the worst person ever. Maybe that's
Yeah,
just me.
I'm like, it's over. Better luck
over, give
tomorrow.
up.
Yeah. So usually like during the week, I, get again like an hour here, 2 hours there. And I always try to like schedule out time that's like not comic work. Like an hour to go to the gym and then like time to like watch TV shows or something in the evening
Yeah, yeah.
because otherwise I would burn out. But usually that means that like Saturday and Sunday, it's like grind time, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
That's kind of like my biggest tip is just do what you can when you can, especially if you're not being paid for it, because it's a fun thing and you should have fun while you're doing it and not feel like you're like working under the clock.
Yeah, or even just like obligated to anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, your main obligation in your comic should be to be having fun, to make the comic because you want to make the comic.
Yeah.
Now, if Webtoon wants to pay me to make the comic, I will happily work under the clock.
Yeah, Sam, I will take on some obligations if
Yeah,
it
if
means
Webtoon,
money.
if you're listening, disregard all of that and hire me.
Yeah, yeah. So now we're on to our last question, which I like to ask all of our guests. Sometimes people have huge answers, sometimes people have simple answers, sometimes people are like, I don't know. But
Okay.
do you have any life advice?
I mean, I guess the best advice that I have, and this is kind of specifically still pertaining to like the internet and webcomics, is just do the thing if you want to do the thing. Because I know when I started working on my webtoon, I was scared to post about it like on my Instagram and stuff because I was like, oh no, people that I'm like friends with and like went to high school with are gonna know and they're gonna think I'm weird. Like if you're passionate about something, most people aren't gonna think that you're weird for it. So just do the thing. And if you mess up, you mess up. You can do it again. In most cases, you can do it again. In the case of webcomics, you can always redo it.
Yeah, yeah. Webcomics aren't like surgery. Like, if you mess up a
Yeah.
comic, you can
No,
just
if
restart.
you're going to medical school, this is
Not
good advice. If you're going to medical school, yeah. If you're going into medicine, read your book and be perfect every time and don't take risks.
Sounds great. Great. Yeah, that was a great interview. I feel like we got a lot out of that, or at least I did.
I don't know. I had a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want to tell everyone where to find you?
Yeah, sure. I'm not on a lot of social media. I'm Taylor_draws _ on Instagram. I'm pretty sure that's my handle on everything. That's my TikTok handle. That's my Webtoon handle. I'm thinking about starting a Twitter potentially for like advertising purposes, but that's not a thing that exists as of yet. Taylor_draws _ on pretty much everything.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, go out now that this interview is basically over. Go read The Beasts of Amity Bluff. It is really good.
Yes.
I will Well, I don't want to guarantee, but if you have taste, you will enjoy it.
Oh.
If you don't have taste, ignore this.
If you don't have taste, you can go away now. Thank you.
Bye. Well, I think that's it for today. Well, I was gonna say we'll see you guys later, but I guess I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.